Y'all come on over, even if it's 20 people. My mom has been slaving over the stove all day. It's not like she has anything better to do." My daughter's voice rang out loud to her guests over the phone. Her husband, my son-in-law, chuckled in agreement. "That's right, she needs to earn her keep." I silently took off my apron, turned off the gas, and walked out the back door. When the guests arrived, my daughter found a surprise waiting for her in the kitchen that made her blood run cold. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask a small favor. If you love real-life tales that make you stop and think, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what city or state you're listening from. It warms my heart to see how many of us there are. Now, enjoy the story. The heat in the kitchen was so thick you could almost slice it with a knife, like dense butter. 12 hours. That's how long I'd been on my feet, without a single minute of rest. The air was heavy, saturated with the rich, sweet scent of duck confit, slowly simmering in its own fat, cut by the delicate, metallic note of saffron I'd worked into the puff pastry dough. These were the smells of my life, smells that once brought me triumph, applause, and the respect of the city's top food critics. But today, this smell felt like the air of servitude. My feet were so swollen that my house slippers were biting into my skin, leaving deep red marks. A dull, gnawing pain, an old acquaintance I'd known since my days as executive chef at the Metropole, had settled in my lower back. Back then, that pain was the price of success. Now it was the price of silence in a house that was rightfully mine, yet where I felt like an unwanted visitor. Beyond the wall, in the spacious living room, I heard the delicate chime of glasses. The crystal sang a high, expensive tune. It was the special vintage wine, a case of which I'd paid for last week with my Social Security check, because Bryce, my son-in-law, had forgotten to wire the money for groceries. I could hear the loud, rolling laughter of my daughter, Destiny, and Bryce's self-satisfied mumble. They were celebrating early, celebrating the success of a dinner that hadn't yet begun, and a promotion he hadn't yet received. Tonight was critical for them. Mr. Mason Cole, Bryce's boss, a traditional man with incredibly demanding tastes, was due to decide the fate of their family, or more accurately, the fate of Bryce's debts, which he thought I knew nothing about. I carefully pulled open the oven door. The blast of hot air hit my face. The duck was perfect. The skin was just starting to turn that antique gold color that had once earned me the nickname, the Sorceress. All that was left was to glaze it with honey and orange zest. The kitchen door burst open, letting in a draft and the aroma of expensive perfume. Destiny. She was wearing a new ivory silk dress that clung to her figure. She looked stunning if you didn't look her in the eyes. In them, there was only anxious calculation. She glanced over the kitchen island, which was laden with platters of appetizers, fig and goat cheese canapes, rabbit terrine, and miniature tartlets. "Mama," her voice was sharp with irritation, "why are the canapes arranged in a circle? I asked for a checkerboard pattern. This looks ancient. Mr. Cole likes modern presentation." I took a slow, deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. "A circular arrangement allows guests to pick up appetizers without knocking over the neighboring one, Destiny. That's etiquette, not a fashion trend." She rolled her eyes, nervously adjusting her hair. "Ugh, don't start with your 90s lecture. Just redo it. And hurry up, they'll be here in 40 minutes. She pulled a folded stack of cloth from the bag she was holding and tossed it onto the chair next to me. "Put this on. Your old apron is covered in grease spots. We can't have you coming out to the guests looking like that." I unfolded the cloth. It wasn't the chef's coat I'd worn with pride for half my life. It was a black and white maid's uniform with a lace apron. Something in my chest clenched, cold and painful. "Destiny," I said quietly, "I won't wear a servant's uniform. I've cooked this dinner for 3 days. I'm a professional, not a housekeeper." "You're a grandmother who is helping her family," she snapped, a cold steel ringing in her voice. Mr. Cole shouldn't know my mother cooked. Bryce told him he hired a private chef catering service. If he sees you in that old thing, the whole story falls apart. Put the uniform on. And please, when you serve the main course, just be quiet. Don't talk to him. You'll start rambling about your old diner days, and we'll be embarrassed. She turned on her heel and swept out, leaving me alone with the humming of the exhaust fan and the maid's uniform lying on the chair like a verdict. I stood motionless. My wrists ached from hours of chopping, but now I felt not physical exhaustion, but a strange emptiness. I looked at the duck, at the sauces I'd reduced for hours to achieve the perfect consistency. I did this for her, for Destiny, so her husband could get this damn promotion and they would stop fighting about money. I gave them everything, my retirement savings, my strength, my house. The landline phone in the hallway, a traditional touch I'd kept, rang. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and the voices carried clearly, as if they were speaking right into my ear. "Yes, Lizzie, of course, come over." Destiny's voice was falsely effusive. "Oh, no trouble at all." Pause. I picked up a knife to chop herbs, but froze. "Come, all of you, even if it's 20 people." Destiny laughed into the receiver. "We have tons of food. My mom has been over the stove all day. It's not like she has anything better to do. She'll be happy to help. At least she's useful for something while she sits around the house." Bryce's laugh boomed next, bassy and well-fed. "Exactly. Let her earn her keep. She lives here for free, after all. Burning up the electricity, running the water. Let her work." Those words fell into the quiet of my mind like heavy stones into a deep well. Anything better to do. Earn her keep. Lives here for free. In the house I bought. In the house I restored from ruins with the royalties from my cookbooks. In the house where I paid every bill while Bryce bought himself new watches. Suddenly, the kitchen heat vanished. I felt cold, but not the shivering kind. It was the cold of absolute clarity. The same cold that used to settle over me when a dish was returned to the restaurant kitchen during the rush, or when a supplier tried to sneak in spoiled fish. Emotions shut off. Only function remained. I looked at the perfectly diced shallots, the marinated duck, the dough rising under the towel. I didn't cry. I had no tears. Instead, my movements became crisp and economical. I walked to the stove. Click. The gas under the duck went out. Click. The sauce stopped simmering. I turned off the oven where the gratin was finishing. I took the baking sheet of raw fish, just prepared for roasting, and silently placed it in the fridge. I put it down carelessly, right on top of the fresh salad. I took off my working apron, the stained one that had witnessed hundreds of my culinary victories. I folded it neatly and placed it on the windowsill. I didn't change clothes. I was wearing simple black slacks and a white blouse. It was enough. I went to the bread bin. Inside lay a loaf of cheap supermarket bread, the kind Bryce bought specifically for me, believing I didn't deserve the artisanal baguettes from the bakery. It was stale, hard as a brick. I put that loaf in the very center of the luxurious kitchen island where the main course should have stood. I took a large serrated bread knife and with force drove it vertically into the hard crust. The knife plunged deep and remained sticking straight up like an obelisk, a tombstone for the dinner. Let her earn her keep. Here is your keep. Earn it. I grabbed my purse, which was hanging on a hook by the door, and checked that my ID was inside. Then I opened the back door, the one we usually use to take out the trash. It was raining outside. A cold autumn shower roared through the leaves of the old garden. I stepped into the darkness without looking back. I left the kitchen door wide open, letting in the dampness, the wind, and the cold night, which were now the only masters of my kitchen. The rain lashed my face, washing away the sweat and kitchen heat, but I didn't quicken my pace. My shoes, soaked instantly, squelched on the gravel, but strangely, I no longer felt the pain in my feet. That leaden weight that had pressed me down for the last 5 years stayed back there, behind the wide-open back door, along with the smell of cooling duck and the false laughter of my children. Instead of fear, for I was an older woman walking into nothingness without money or belongings. An icy, crystalline clarity spread inside me. It was the feeling you get when you step out to face a disgruntled customer, not to apologize, but to set them straight. I was Martha James again, not Mama who's just sitting around anyway. I reached the road. Headlights cut my figure out of the darkness. An old cab, clearly rushing toward the city, braked. The driver, a young man with tired eyes, looked at me in confusion. My wet blouse clung to my body, my hair was messy, but my posture was straight, like a queen in exile. "Take me to Pine Grove Manor," I said, getting into the back seat. My voice didn't waver. "Lorraine Dubois, my old rival, my only friend. In the 90s, we fought for every client, poached each other's truffle suppliers, and wrote nasty reviews about each other in the papers. She was the shark, I was the lioness. Now we were just two lonely women who knew the price of good cognac and bad relatives." She opened the door herself. In her house, unlike mine, the staff knew their place and their time off. Lorraine, in a deep burgundy velvet robe, stood frozen with a cigarette in a holder, staring at the puddle forming on her pristine hardwood floor from my slacks. "James," she raised an eyebrow, and the ash dropped to the floor. "You look like you tried to drown yourself in the pond, but the water spat you back out for your rotten attitude." "Pour me a drink, Lorraine," was all I said, walking into the living room. 10 minutes later, I was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a dry wool throw, with a snifter of Armagnac in my hands. I told her everything, not complaining, but dryly, the way you'd read off a list of ingredients, about earning my keep, about the maid's uniform, about the knife in the stale loaf. Lorraine didn't gasp or wail. She listened, her eyes narrowed, like a general hearing an intelligence report. "You're a fool, Martha," she said finally, exhaling a stream of smoke. "A brilliant cook, but a complete fool. You think Bryce keeps you under his thumb because he despises you? No. He keeps you there because without you, he's a zero, a nobody. He's selling your genius and passing it off as his own. He's not just a parasite. He's a thief who convinced the victim that he was robbing her out of mercy." She leaned toward me, and her eyes held the predatory fire I remembered from our youth. "You didn't just leave. You took their reputation with you. Do you have a plan?" "I have something better," I replied, looking into the fire. "I have timing." I looked at the antique clock on the mantelpiece. 7:08. I knew the schedule for that evening down to the second. Right now, at the house I'd abandoned, the first act of the tragedy was beginning. I closed my eyes and pictured it so vividly it was as if I were directing the scene myself. My absence wouldn't be noticed immediately. Destiny was probably preening in front of the mirror, fixing her makeup, confident that the help was silently performing her duty in the kitchen. Bryce must have already poured the aperitif, boasting to Mr. Cole about his signature menu items. Mr. Cole arrived exactly at 7:30. I knew his punctuality. He was a gourmet, a man for whom waiting for food was part of the ritual. He surely walked into the dining room, rubbing his hands together, his eyes sparkling in anticipation of the duck Bryce had been raving about. "Well, now," his voice must have boomed. "Amaze me, Mr. Hawthorne. I haven't eaten since lunch. I saved room for your masterpiece." Destiny, beaming with the smile of a society hostess, would have glided toward the kitchen. "Just a moment, Mr. Cole. The appetizers are coming. My mother, our private chef, has prepared an exquisite terrine." She'd nudged the kitchen door open with her hip, expecting to be greeted by steam, the sound of work, and me, obediently arranging canapes on a platter. But she would be met with silence, a dead, cold silence. The vent wouldn't be humming, the pans wouldn't be sizzling. Destiny would freeze in the doorway. Her eyes would dart to the stove. Dark, no flame, cold pots. She would look at the prep table. Where the exquisite appetizers should have been, there would be a pile of raw vegetables, already starting to dry out. The duck, undercooked, pale, floating in chilled fat that had turned into a whitish crust. And in the center of all this splendor, like a flag on a battlefield after a defeat, would stand that cheap loaf of bread with the knife sticking out of it. Next to it, a small scrap of white paper on which I had written only 2 words. Enjoy yourselves." I took a sip of Armagnac, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I knew what Destiny would do now. She would panic. She would try to turn on the stove. She would think I had simply left, forgetting to turn off the gas, and that everything could still be saved if she quickly turned the fire back on and finished the meat. But she was wrong. I reached into the pocket of my wet slacks and pulled out 3 small, heavy ceramic cylinders. I placed them on the table in front of Lorraine. They thumped dully against the polished wood. Lorraine raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What is that?" "Those are the main fuses for the professional oven and the gas igniter," I answered calmly. "It's an old Italian model I ordered 10 years ago. Replacement parts can only be found by special order from Milan. 2 weeks wait." I smiled for the first time that evening. Even if they call another catering service right now, they won't have anything to reheat the food on. The kitchen is dead, Lorraine. I didn't just leave. I shut down the heart of that house. Lorraine burst into a deep, throaty laugh that made her cough, and she brushed the ash off her robe. "You are a vicious woman, James," she rasped, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. "And I adore you for it." Meanwhile, 3 miles away, the chaos I had orchestrated unfolded as clearly as the flames in the fireplace before me. Destiny bolted from the kitchen, pale as a sheet, nearly running into Bryce, who was heading toward her with an empty olive dish. "There's nothing! There's nothing there!" she hissed, clutching the lapel of his jacket. "Mama left! The stove doesn't work! The duck is raw! Bryce, there's nothing but that damn loaf of bread!" My son-in-law's face flushed dark red. He shoved his wife aside and stormed into the kitchen. He saw the knife sticking out of the bread. He saw the cold stove. He spun the burner knobs once, twice, 3 times. The clicks of the igniter were silent. Darkness. He ripped open the oven door. Darkness. "That old witch!" he yelled, kicking the leg of the table so hard the dishes jumped. "She decided to throw a fit at the most crucial moment. Where is she? In her room? In the garden?" "I don't know." Destiny was on the verge of tears. "Her things aren't here. The back door is open." "Where's she gonna go?" Bryce snorted scornfully, adjusting his tie. "She's old, sick, no money. She'll sit in the gazebo in the rain for half an hour, get cold, and come crawling back to beg forgiveness." He wiped his mouth, putting on the mask of the gracious host. "I'll go out to the guests. I'll say we have a slight technical delay, that it's part of the show, slow simmering for a special flavor. And you," he jabbed a finger at Destiny's chest, "you go find her and drag her back here by the neck. I don't care if she finishes cooking the food on a bonfire in the yard." He turned and walked into the dining room, smiling broadly. "Friends, Mr. Cole, I apologize for the small pause. Our chef, a perfectionist, decided to add one last flourish to the sauce. It will only take 10 minutes, but the taste will be divine. In the meantime, let's enjoy the wine." Meanwhile, I was sinking into hot water. Lorraine's bathroom was the size of my former bedroom. Marble, gold trim, aromatic candles. I felt the hot water dissolving the tension in my muscles, the pain draining from my swollen feet. On the edge of the tub lay my old flip phone. I hadn't turned it on in several years. Bryce had insisted I turn it off. "Why do you need it, Mama? We're always here, and it just runs down the battery." In reality, he just didn't want me to be able to call anyone without their knowledge. I pressed the power button. The screen glowed with a faint greenish light. The phone chirped as it found the network and immediately began vibrating non-stop. Texts rained down like hail. "Mama, where are you? Come back immediately. You are humiliating us. Mr. Cole is waiting. If you don't come back right now, you can forget about this house. Are you out of your mind? Turn the stove on, you ungrateful woman. I'll send you to a nursing home." That was Bryce. The last message arrived a minute ago. I looked at the screen with the indifference of a pathologist. No fear, no resentment, only the recognition of a fact. Patient is deceased. Decomposition started long ago. I put the phone aside, not answering any of the messages. Instead, I dialed a number I knew by heart. The number of Arthur Davis, the owner of the Vine and Barrel Wine Boutique. The same man who had personally delivered the case of collectible Bordeaux to our house earlier that day. Arthur. My voice was firm, despite the steam rising from the water. It's Martha James. Good evening, Ms. James. Sincere delight was audible on the line. What an honor! I hope the wine is pleasing to your guests. I selected the best bottles just as you requested. The 2005 vintage, a velvety taste. Arthur, listen closely, I interrupted him. There's been a mistake. I did not authorize the opening of those bottles. Furthermore, I am canceling the order. Silence hung on the other end. But Ms. James, the case is already there. Your son-in-law accepted it. He signed the invoice. I thought you were celebrating. My son-in-law did not pay for that wine, Arthur. I paid for it with my card. And I, as the owner of the goods, state, the wine is being used without my consent. That is theft. I'm asking you, as an old friend and a supplier who values his reputation, to pick it up right now. But I've already left. Though, he stammered, my assistant Michael should still be there. He was helping with the glass service. They asked for a sommelier for an hour. Call Michael, I said in an icy tone. Tell him to immediately confiscate the unpaid merchandise directly from the table. From their hands, if necessary. Ms. James, this is a scandal, Arthur muttered. This is justice, Arthur. Do it, or you'll never see me in your boutique again. And you know how many clients I've brought you. Understood. Arthur's voice became professional. Michael will do it in 2 minutes. I hung up and sank back into the water up to my chin. In the dining room of my house, Bryce was just pouring the wine. The dark ruby liquid flowed into Mr. Cole's wide glass. The boss raised the glass to his nose, inhaled the aroma, and nodded approvingly. Not bad, Bryce. Not bad at all. Bordeaux, you have expensive taste. People say you're drowning in debt, yet you drink like royalty. Bryce chuckled nervously. Oh, Mr. Cole, only the best for a guest like you. These are from my personal stock. At that moment, the dining room door opened. Michael, the young sommelier, walked in wearing a black apron. He looked pale but determined. He walked straight to the table, not looking at the guests. Excuse me, he said loudly. His voice trembled, but the words were clear. I am forced to interrupt the tasting. Bryce froze, the bottle in his hand. What do you think you're doing, kid? Get back to the kitchen and help. Michael decisively reached out and took the bottle from Bryce. Then he walked up to Mr. Cole. I apologize, sir, he said, gently but firmly taking the glass from the stunned boss's hand. This wine is the property of Ms. Martha James. An order has just been received from the owner. Consumption is unauthorized. I am reclaiming the merchandise. What? Bryce shrieked. Are you insane? I'll call the police. This is my house. The wine was paid for with the card of Miss Martha James, Michael stated, placing the bottles back into the wooden case. She reported theft. I am simply returning the property to its rightful owner to avoid a criminal case. Dead silence fell in the dining room. 20 guests froze, forks in hand. Mr. Cole slowly shifted his gaze from the empty tablecloth in front of him to Bryce's red, sweaty face. Theft? He repeated quietly, and the tone made Bryce's knees buckle. Personal stock, you say? Michael grabbed the case and left, leaving behind a trail of expensive aroma and an atmosphere of utter, total disgrace. And in the bathroom of the Pine Grove Manor estate, I closed my eyes and smiled for real. The first move had been made. Bryce stood in the middle of the dining room, gasping for air, like a fish thrown onto the shore. His hands were shaking. He tried to say something after the departing sommelier, but only a pathetic squeak escaped his throat. The guests, 20 pairs of eyes, looked at him not with sympathy, but with disgusted curiosity. The way you look at an acrobat who fell from the trapeze, but instead of crashing, landed face first in a cake. Well then? Mr. Cole's voice was like the crack of a whip in the cotton wool silence. He slowly wiped his empty hands with a napkin, as if cleansing himself of dirt. No wine, no appetizers. Maybe the main course will save the situation. Or was the duck also confiscated by the bailiffs? Bryce jumped as if shocked. He began to fuss, trying to project confidence. Of course, the duck. It will be here any minute. It's just a misunderstanding with the supplier. A bank error. I'll bring out the masterpiece now." He darted into the kitchen, nearly knocking over Destiny, who was standing in the doorway, pale, her lipstick smeared. "What are you doing?" she hissed, grabbing his sleeve. "There's nothing there. The stove is dead. The duck is raw." "Shut up," he barked in a whisper, pushing her away. "Order pizza, sushi, anything. Say it's a fusion concept, an ironic take on fine dining." Irony. Destiny stared at him in horror. "Mr. Cole doesn't eat irony, you idiot. He eats foie gras." A heavy silence fell in the dining room again. Mr. Cole, not waiting for an answer, stood up from the table. He was a portly man, but he moved with alarming lightness. He walked past the frozen Destiny and straight into the kitchen. "Allow me to take a look," he said, entering the inner sanctum. The scene that greeted him was more eloquent than any words. The cold stove, the raw duck in congealed fat, and that loaf of bread with the knife, which no one had dared to remove, as if it were a cursed totem. Mr. Cole walked up to the table. He didn't yell. He simply bent over the duck, touched the bird's cold skin with his finger, and carefully inspected the marinade. "Honey, orange zest, star anise." He sniffed. "Cardamom. Interesting choice. Mr. Hawthorne, tell me, at what point do you add the cardamom? At the beginning of the marinating or before roasting?" Bryce, who had rushed in after him, froze. Sweat beaded on his temples. In the middle," he stammered, guessing wildly. To let the flavor bloom." Mr. Cole slowly straightened up and looked at him with icy contempt. "Cardamom is added at the very end to the glaze. Otherwise it burns and turns bitter. Anyone who has stood by a stove with a bird like this knows that. You didn't cook this dish, Bryce. You don't even know how to cook it." Bryce opened his mouth to lie again, but Mr. Cole raised his hand, stopping him. "Enough. I don't like being taken for an idiot. You can eat the pizza yourselves." He turned and left. A minute later, the sound of a car driving away could be heard. The other guests followed, muttering vague apologies. The party of the year ended before it even began. Meanwhile, I was sitting in Lorraine's kitchen, wrapped in a warm robe, drinking time tea. Lorraine sat opposite me, sorting through papers I had placed on the table. "So, it's even worse than I thought," she said, removing her glasses. "This isn't just domestic rudeness, it's a scam." I nodded. Yes, and I would have kept silent if I hadn't found this. I pushed a thin folder toward her, the only thing I had taken with me, besides my passport, when I left the house. Lorraine opened the folder. It was a contract with the publishing house, New Flavor, for a book titled The Modern Host, Secrets of Manly Cuisine. Author, Bryce Hawthorne, *. The advance, already paid and spent. Manuscript submission deadline, 3 days away. "He sold a book," I said quietly. "A cookbook, my recipes. He promised the publisher unique family secrets, forgotten techniques of Southern cooking. He planned that I would cook, as usual, and he would stand next to me with a voice recorder, writing it down and passing it off as his own thoughts, or just force me to write everything in a notebook." Lorraine whistled. "And he's already blown the advance." "Of course. The new SUV, the watches, the remodel of their bedroom, all bought with money he received for a book he can't write because he can't even cook an egg without burning it." "But this is fraud." Lorraine tapped the contract with her finger. "Pure and simple. Worse," I smiled, the smile bitter. "It's plagiarism." I pulled an old worn magazine from my purse, Culinary Arts Review, the November 1999 issue. On the cover was me, young, in a tall chef's hat, with that very duck on a platter. "The James Standard," Lorraine read the article's headline. "Your famous series of recipe cards." Exactly. All the recipes he claimed in the book synopsis are my original creations, Officially published and registered 25 years ago. They are my intellectual property. If he tries to publish them under his name, the publisher will sue him so hard he'll be left with nothing. And if he doesn't submit the manuscript, he'll have to return the advance, which he doesn't have, plus a penalty. Lorraine finished for me, her eyes shining. Martha, you have him by the throat. I have him by the wallet, I corrected. And for people like Bryce, that's the same thing. At that moment, my phone vibrated again. It wasn't Bryce. It was Destiny. I looked at the screen, where a photo of my daughter, small, laughing, with bows in her hair, lit up. How long ago that was. Now, on the other end of the line, was a stranger who had betrayed me for the chance to look rich. Don't answer, Lorraine said. I wasn't going to. I flipped the phone face down. Let them suffer until morning. Morning is wiser than evening, especially when you wake up with the hangover of humiliation and debt. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The moon illuminated Lorraine's garden, stark and well-maintained. Somewhere out there in the dark was my house, my kitchen, my life, which they had tried to steal. They would come tomorrow. I knew it. They had no choice. They would come not to apologize. They would come to demand, to beg, to manipulate. They would pressure me with guilt, family, and the grandchildren they didn't have yet, but were already speculating with. But they didn't know one thing. The Martha who stood meekly by the stove was gone. She had walked out the back door and dissolved into the rain. Tomorrow they would meet a different woman, a woman who held not a ladle, but facts, and those facts cut deeper than any knife. The morning arrived, gray and unforgiving, like a bad hangover, which is exactly what it was for Destiny and Bryce. I knew what was happening at my house, silence, broken only by the ringing phone that they were afraid to answer. At 8 o'clock, an email arrived in Bryce's inbox from Mr. Cole. A copy was sent to HR. In light of recent discoveries regarding your professional integrity, the matter of your promotion is frozen pending the conclusion of an internal investigation. It was polite corporate language that meant, you're a liar, and we know it. At 9 o'clock, the publishing house called. The editor, a woman with a voice that tolerated no argument, reminded him that the manuscript deadline was Friday. We hope the files are ready to send, Mr. Hawthorne. We're laying out the pages on Monday. Any delay would result in penalties, according to Clause 4.2 of the contract. Bryce was probably sitting in the kitchen, staring at the cold pizza, realizing he was trapped. He couldn't write that book. He didn't even remember the names of the spices I used. Without me, he was a naked king. And not just naked, but a naked king with a huge debt. The advance was spent to the last dime. If he didn't submit the manuscript, he would have to return the money he didn't have. They found me by noon. It wasn't hard. The cab dispatcher, a good soul, remembered, for a small tip, where she had dropped off the distinguished lady in the rain. I stood at the window in Lorraine's living room and watched their car, splattered with mud, pull up to the wrought iron gates. They got out. Destiny in dark sunglasses, hiding swollen eyes. Bryce hunched over, in a wrinkled shirt, stripped of his usual polish. They looked pathetic, but I knew pity was a luxury I could no longer afford. I walked out to the gate. I was wearing an elegant sand-colored cashmere suit that Lorraine had loaned me. I was well rested. I felt powerful. They saw me through the bars of the gate and froze. For a second, a flicker of relief crossed Destiny's eyes. Mama is found. Mama is alive. But it was immediately replaced by the familiar look of spoiled demand. Mama, she yelled, grabbing the bars. Thank God! Do you realize what you've done? We were worried sick. My blood pressure is up. Bryce is having heart palpitations. Open up right now. Let's go home. Bryce walked up behind her, trying to put on an expression of injured virtue. Ms. Martha James, he began, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. Your stunt crossed every line. You made us look like complete idiots in front of Mr. Cole. But we are willing to forgive you. We are family. Let's go. We need to talk seriously about the book, about my project. You have to help me finish the manuscript. It's a matter of life and death. Help me finish. How charming. Not write it for me, but help me finish. Even now, standing on the edge of a precipice, he continued to lie to himself. I didn't open the gate. I stood on the other side, on my territory, and looked at them like strangers. I am not going anywhere, I said calmly. What do you mean you're not going? Destiny shrieked. Mama, enough with the dramatics. Bryce's deadlines are burning. If he doesn't submit the book by Friday, we'll be sued. You have to dictate the recipes to him. You're obligated. We feed you. We take care of you. You feed me? I repeated softly. With the bread I have to earn? Bryce winced, as if with tooth pain. I just said that in the heat of the moment, so what? Old people always get offended by trivial things. Ms. James, let's be adults. I admit I was harsh, but now is not the time for grudges. My career, our financial stability, is at stake. You don't want your daughter to end up on the street. No, I don't, I agreed. That's why I made sure the situation was perfectly clear. I took a folded sheet of paper from the folder I was holding and slid it through the bars of the gate. What is this? Bryce took the paper suspiciously. Read it. He unfolded the paper. His eyes raced across the lines. First he frowned, then his face began to drain of color until it was as gray as the asphalt beneath his feet. This is a joke, he whispered. It's not a joke, I replied. It's an official eviction notice. Destiny snatched the paper from his hands. Demand to vacate the premises within 30 calendar days. Owner M. James, she read, stammering. Mama, are you serious? You're throwing us out of our house? Out of my house, Destiny, I corrected her. Out of the house I built. Out of the house where you turned me into free help. Where you thought I was living on borrowed time. Now you'll find out what real borrowed time is. You have a month. You wouldn't dare, Bryce yelled, crumpling the notice. I'm your son-in-law. I'm registered there. Temporary residence, Bryce, I reminded him. It expired 2 months ago. You forgot to renew it. You were too busy spending the advance for my book. So legally, you are nobody there. A guest who overstayed his welcome. Mama! Destiny started crying, but there was no remorse in those tears, only rage. How can you? We're your children. Where will we go? We don't have money for an apartment. Bryce invested everything in investments. In investments in himself, I clarified. In watches, in suits, in an SUV. Let him sell the SUV. Let him sell the watches. I don't care. Bryce lunged at the gate, gripping the bars with white knuckles. His face was contorted in a mask of hatred. You old hag, he hissed, spitting. You think you won? I'll declare you mentally incompetent. I'll say you have dementia, that you're a danger to society. I'll have you locked up in an asylum, and I'll take the house under guardianship. You will sign this book, or I will destroy you. I looked at him and didn't recognize the man I had given my daughter to 10 years ago. Where was that charming young man, or had he never existed? There was only this predator, who now cornered, snarled, and roared. Try it, I said quietly. But before you start a war, remember, I know about the publishing contract. I know you sold my recipes, and if you make one move against me, I will call the publisher myself. And then you'll lose not only your house and your job. You will go to jail for fraud. Bryce recoiled as if slapped. He understood. I knew everything. His main secret, his vulnerability, was in my hands. Let's go, he snapped at Destiny, turning sharply toward the car. It's useless talking to this crazy woman. Destiny looked at me with a long, hateful stare. I will never forgive you for this, Mama, she said. You destroyed our family. You destroyed the family, I called back to her, when you decided that your mother was disposable. They got into the car. The engine roared, and the vehicle sped away, engulfing me in a cloud of exhaust fumes. I stood and watched them until the red taillights disappeared around the bend. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I did it. I cut the umbilical cord that had been choking me for years. I no longer had a family in the sense I used to think of it, but I had myself, and I had a home I was about to reclaim. Lorraine came out of the house and silently placed a hand on my shoulder. Harsh, she said, but fair. Come inside for some tea. You still have a lot of work ahead of you. I nodded. Yes, there was a lot of work, but now I knew I could handle it, because the worst part, losing my illusions, had already happened. And it turned out that breathing was much easier without them. I went back into Lorraine's house, feeling the tremor in my hands gradually subside, replaced by cold determination. The Earl Grey tea waiting for me on the table was hot and strong. I took a sip, and the warmth spread inside, bringing back a sense of reality. Bryce and Destiny had left, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the first skirmish, a reconnaissance mission. Bryce was a cornered animal, and such animals are twice as dangerous. The threat of eviction and exposure wouldn't stop him. It would only make him seek new, dirtier ways out. I was not wrong. 3 hours passed. The sun had passed its zenith, filling the living room with soft autumn light. The gate bell rang again. This time there was no car, no hysterics. Only Bryce stood at the gate, alone. He looked different. His jacket was buttoned all the way up. His hair was slicked back. In his hands he held a bouquet of flowers, a huge, gaudy arrangement of cellophane-wrapped roses, obviously bought at the nearest stand. I went out to meet him. Lorraine watched from the window, ready to call security at any moment. "Ms. James," Bryce began, his voice oily and fawning, barely letting me get close. "Forgive me, forgive us. We lost our temper. Nerves, you understand, with so much piled up." He held the bouquet out to me through the bars. I didn't take it. The flowers remained hanging in the air, a ridiculous splash of color against the gray metal. "What do you want, Bryce?" I asked, tired. "I said everything this morning." "Mama? Can I call you Mama?" He tried to smile, but it came out crooked like a grimace. "Listen, I realize everything. I was wrong. I acted like a pig. You are a great woman, a talent. I always knew it. I just wanted to live up to you. I wanted you to be proud of your son-in-law." He lowered the hand holding the flowers, realizing that this act wasn't working. "Let's make a deal." His tone became businesslike, confidential. "I understand you're hurt, and rightly so, but why should we ruin each other's lives? The book. That book is our collective chance, understand?" He moved closer, his face almost pressed against the bars. "I propose a deal. You help me with the recipes. Just dictate them, nothing more. I'll write everything down, I'll handle the paperwork, and I'll include you as a co-author. No, even better. I'll write in the foreword that the book is dedicated to you, my muse and mentor. Beautiful, right?" I remained silent, looking at him with the same feeling you get when looking at mold that has spoiled good cheese. Disgust and regret for the wasted product. "And money," he added hastily, seeing my silence. "I'll give you 15% of the royalties. No, 20. That's good money, Ms. James. You can buy yourself, well, anything you want. Take a trip to the Caribbean." 20%, I repeated. "Of the money you already spent?" Bryce flinched. "But from future royalties. The book will be a bestseller, believe me. We'll make millions. Just help me now. Save me from the publisher, from Mr. Cole, and I'll put everything right. I swear, we'll live like we used to, amicably, as one family. I'll even cook on the weekends myself." He was lying. He was lying in every word, every gesture. He wasn't going to return anything. He wanted to use me one last time, to squeeze me dry to save his own skin. And then he really would have thrown me into a nursing home or declared me crazy, just as he threatened this morning, just to take revenge for the humiliation. "Are you finished?" I asked. "Ms. James, be reasonable." Hysterical notes were creeping into his voice. "If you refuse, I'll go under. I'll lose everything. And Destiny will too. You want your daughter to suffer?" "I want my daughter to grow up," I replied. "And you? You've already sunk, Bryce. You just don't know it yet." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "Remember this morning you screamed that the book was your intellectual property? That I was nobody?" I tapped the screen. In the silence, his own voice, recorded just a few hours ago during their morning visit, rang out. I had turned on the voice recorder the moment he started threatening me. "You old hag, I'll declare you mentally incompetent. You will sign this book, or I will destroy you." The recording was clear. Every word, every tone of hatred. Bryce went so pale he looked like a dead man. The bouquet fell from his hands and slapped into the mud. You recorded that?" he whispered. "Of course," I nodded. "I'm old, out of my mind, remember? And old folks have their quirks." I turned off the recording. "Now listen to me carefully. I don't want your percentages. I don't want to be your co-author. And I don't want your dedications. I don't care about your money. I want my house, and I want you out of my life." "You wouldn't dare use that," he croaked. "That's blackmail." "It's insurance," I corrected. "If you ever come near me or Lorraine again, or try to harm Destiny in any way to pressure me, this recording will go to the police and the publisher, along with a report of extortion and threats to my life." He stood there, staring at me with glazed eyes. He understood that he had lost completely and irrevocably. He had no more cards left, no strength, no cunning, no manipulation. 30 days, Bryce, I reminded him. The clock is ticking. I turned and walked toward the house without looking back. I heard him hit the metal gate with his fist, heard his suppressed roar of impotent rage, but I didn't care. I walked into the house. Lorraine stood in the hall, arms crossed over her chest. "Bravo," she said. "I couldn't have done it better, but you know he won't give up that easily. A cornered rat will go for the throat." "I know," I replied, taking off my jacket. "He'll try something else, something underhanded. A last chance. So what are we going to do?" I looked at her and smiled. "We're going to cook, Lorraine. We're going to do what we do best, because the best revenge is success." "You mean that same dinner?" Her eyes lit up. "Yes, the same dinner he ruined. Only this time, we'll cook it right, for people who know how to appreciate it, and we'll invite one very important guest." Lorraine understood me instantly. "Mr. Cole." "Exactly. Bryce will try to blacken my name to him. He's probably already cooking up a story about my mental instability. So let's give Mr. Cole a chance to decide for himself who is crazy and who is a genius." We walked into Lorraine's kitchen, spacious, bright, and equipped with the latest technology. I ran my hand over the cold steel countertop. This was my battlefield, and I was ready for the final fight. "Get the duck, Lorraine," I said, tying on an apron. "We have a lot of work to do." Lorraine laid the chilled duck carcass on the table, and that sound, the dull, heavy slap of flesh on metal, became the signal for the start of a new battle. I knew Bryce wouldn't surrender. He was a man for whom admitting defeat meant dying, and he made his last desperate move. The next day, around lunchtime, he called Mr. Cole. I didn't hear the conversation, but I knew its content as if I had been standing right there. Bryce, choking with feigned grief, told his boss the terrible truth that his poor mother-in-law, Martha James, was suffering from progressive dementia. That her stunt with the raw duck and the knife in the bread was not a protest, but an episode of madness. That she was aggressive, didn't recognize her relatives, and had run away from home in a fit of paranoia. He begged for a meeting, a confidential lunch, to explain the situation and perhaps ask for financial help for his beloved mama's treatment. He even found a doctor, an old gambling buddy, who, in exchange for a favor, agreed to play along and confirm the diagnosis just by looking at the patient from afar. Mr. Cole, a cautious man, but not without compassion, agreed. He set the meeting for a new trendy spot that had opened just a couple of days ago in a country mansion. A private club for connoisseurs, as his acquaintances had recommended. Bryce had no idea it was a trap he had set for himself. Exactly at 2 o'clock, Mr. Cole's black sedan and Bryce's taxi pulled up to the gate of Pine Grove Manor. Bryce got out of the car, nervously adjusting his tie. With him was the doctor, a stooped man with shifty eyes. They were met by the maitre d' and led into the small hall, a cozy room with a fireplace, where a table was set for 3. Bryce poured out his tale of woe, vividly describing my episodes. "You can't imagine, Mr. Cole, how terrifying it is," he said, shaking his head mournfully. "She confuses sugar with salt, forgets to turn off the gas. And yesterday she was shouting that she was the executive chef of the Metropole. Can you imagine? A woman who spent her whole life cooking stews in a home kitchen." Mr. Cole listened silently, tapping his fingers on the table. "And you say she's here now?" he finally asked. Yes, Bryce nodded. "I found out she's hiding with her friend, the owner of this establishment. I hope we can see her. Dr. Evans will just take a look at her, assess her condition." At that moment, the doors swung open. Waiters entered with trays. The aroma that rushed into the room with them made Mr. Cole freeze. It was the smell of duck. That same duck, with notes of orange, star anise, and correctly added cardamom. A waiter placed the dish in front of Mr. Cole. Golden skin, perfect glaze, a side of caramelized apples. Mr. Cole picked up his fork and knife. He cut a piece, put it in his mouth, and closed his eyes. An expression of bliss came over his face, which then gave way to deep contemplation. "Mr. Hawthorne," he said quietly, without opening his eyes. "You claimed your mother-in-law was a crazy housewife?" "Well, yes." Bryce began to get nervous. "I mean, she cooked at home, but now, the illness—" "This taste," Mr. Cole interrupted him. "I remember it. I ate this dish 25 years ago at the restaurant where the executive chef was the legendary Martha James, the Southern confit duck." He opened his eyes and looked at Bryce with a heavy gaze. "I want to see the chef. Now." Bryce went pale. "Mr. Cole, there must be a mistake. A local cook, maybe." "The chef!" Mr. Cole snapped, so loudly the silverware rattled. The kitchen doors opened, and I walked out. I was not in a house robe, nor in the maid's uniform Destiny had tried to force on me. I was wearing a pristine white chef's coat with my name embroidered in gold on the chest. My hair was tucked under a tall toque. I held my posture like a general on parade. Bryce shrank into his chair. His doctor tried to become invisible. I walked up to the table. "Good afternoon, gentlemen." My voice was calm and commanding. "I hope the duck is to your taste. The cardamom was added to the glaze 5 minutes before completion, as it should be." Mr. Cole slowly rose. In his eyes was respect and recognition. "Ms. James?" he asked. "The one and only Martha James?" "The one and only," I nodded, "whom my son-in-law seems to have just buried alive in his tales." Mr. Cole turned his gaze to Bryce. He sat half dead, realizing that his lie had collapsed, burying him underneath. "You told me she was crazy," Mr. Cole said in an icy tone. "You said she made home stews, but standing before me is one of the finest chefs of the Southern Culinary School, whose recipes were published in magazines when you were still playing with building blocks." He pulled the same Culinary Arts Review magazine from the briefcase by his feet. Apparently, he had done his research after our failed dinner. He opened it to the page with my photo and placed it in front of Bryce. "Copyrights, you say? Family secrets?" Mr. Cole sneered. "You're not just a liar, Bryce. You're a thief. You tried to sell someone else's talent. And when that failed, you decided to destroy the person who possessed it." Bryce tried to stammer something. "Mr. Cole, it's a misunderstanding. I meant, well, the book, the advance." "You're fired," Mr. Cole cut him off. "Not for the ruined dinner, and not even for the debts, but because I do not tolerate people who claim credit for others' work. Get out of here, both of you." Bryce stood up, swaying. He threw a look of pure hatred and despair at me, but I met it with the calm smile of a victor. He understood. I hadn't just thrown him out of the house. I had destroyed his world, which was built on lies. He staggered toward the exit, accompanied by his unfortunate doctor. The door closed behind them. Mr. Cole remained standing. He looked at me and suddenly bowed, slightly, respectfully. "Ms. James," he said, "it is an honor to be a guest at your table. Please forgive me for being blind and allowing that man to mislead me." "Sit down, Mr. Cole," I said, gesturing to the table. "The duck is getting cold, and good food has no time for grudges." He sat down and began to eat with the appetite of a man who had found a treasure. I returned to the kitchen, where Lorraine was waiting for me with 2 champagne flutes. "Checkmate," she whispered, clinking her glass against mine. Yes, it was checkmate. Bryce had lost his job, his reputation, and the chance to publish the book. The publisher, after learning about the plagiarism, a call I was sure Mr. Cole would take care of, would demand the return of the advance through the courts. A fun life awaited him and Destiny, but it no longer concerned me. I looked through the service window into the hall, where an influential man was savoring my creation, and I felt something new being born inside me. This wasn't the end of an old cook's story. This was the beginning of something grand. My hands, accustomed to the knife and the whisk, no longer trembled. They were ready to create, and this time, only for those who deserved it. 3 months passed. Autumn had completely yielded to the first snow, which covered the roof of my house with a soft white blanket. The house was quiet but not empty. There were no more shouts, no smell of other people's expensive perfumes, and no tension that made the air buzz. Bryce and Destiny moved out exactly 30 days later, as specified in the notice. It was a pathetic sight, a moving truck crammed with boxes of things they never learned to value. Bryce, aged 10 years, silently lugged the bags. He never found a new job. Rumors in their niche professional circle spread quickly, and Mr. Cole was a man of his word. The publisher sued, and now they lived in a tiny rental on the outskirts of town, giving half their income to debt repayment. Destiny took a job as an administrator at a beauty salon, and rumor had it spent every evening nagging her husband for destroying their life. But I didn't think about them. I didn't have the time. I was standing in my kitchen, the same one where I had once, in despair, plunged a knife into a stale loaf. Now everything was different here. Destiny's tasteless, trendy plates were gone. On the shelves, the copper of my old pots shone. The air smelled not of fear and exhaustion, but of fresh yeast dough, cinnamon, and roasted quince. The door opened, and Lorraine came in, shaking snow off her fur coat. "Well, maestro?" she asked cheerfully. "Ready for a full house?" "Always ready," I smiled, adjusting my perfectly white apron. We hadn't just gotten my house back, we had turned it into a legend. The first floor of the house was no longer a living room for freeloaders, but an exclusive gastronomic club, the Black Door Supper Club. Lorraine came up with the name in honor of the very back door I had walked through into the rainy night to start a new life. There were no random people here. You could only get in by referral, only 12 seats, 1 dinner a week. The menu was only what I decided to cook that day. No whims, no make it without onions. People drove in from the city, staying on the waiting list for months to taste my southern confit duck or the rabbit terrine my daughter had once rejected. I looked out the window. Cars were pulling up to the gate, expensive, substantial. Mr. Cole and his wife got out of the first one. He had become our regular guest and most loyal fan. He waved at me, seeing my silhouette in the window. I felt tired, that pleasant, deep fatigue in my legs when you know you've given 100%. But this was the exhaustion of the owner, not the help. I cooked not because I had to earn my keep. I cooked because it was my art, my power, and my love. The phone on the counter gently chimed. I walked over. Destiny's name flashed on the screen. I froze. She hadn't called since the move. I wiped my hands on a towel and pressed the answer button. "Hello?" My voice was calm. "Mama?" Her voice sounded pathetic, with notes of that same childish petulance, but now seasoned with genuine need. "Hi, how are you?" "Hello, Destiny. I'm wonderful. I have service starting in half an hour. I'm busy. Is something wrong?" "No, I mean, yes. Mama, well, Bryce is sick. We have no money at all. I'm so tired. I thought maybe we could come over, just for dinner. I miss your cooking so much. Remember those cabbage rolls you used to make? I'm so hungry for normal food." Silence hung on the line. I could hear her breathing, heard the sound of the television in the background. They were probably sitting in their cramped little apartment. She didn't just want to eat. She wanted to come back, test the waters, guilt-trip me. "I'm hungry. I miss you." the old hooks I had been caught on for years. I looked down at my hands, at the ring I had bought myself with the club's first profit. I looked at Lorraine, who was arranging the glasses, and winked at me. "Of course, darling," I said sweetly, and I could almost see Destiny smile on the other end, sensing a weakness. "I'd be happy to see you, but you know the club rules." "What club rules?" she stammered. "Mama, it's me, your daughter." "The Black Door. Destiny, this isn't just a house anymore. It's an establishment. We have a very strict booking policy. A waiting list. Right now," I glanced at the reservation tablet, "it's about 6 months, but I can make an exception for you." "Really?" Hope rang in her voice. "Oh, Mama, thank you." "I can book you for April." I finished the sentence in the same even, kind tone. "If there's a cancellation. And Destiny, we require full prepayment. You can check the prices on the website. No family discounts. Business is business, you understand. Bryce always said you have to know how to earn money, didn't he?" Dead silence fell on the other end of the line. I could hear her hopes for a free meal, for a return to the old feeding trough, crashing down. You're joking?" she whispered. "Mama, I'm your daughter. I'm hungry." "And I, Destiny, want respect," I replied, "and I got it. Have a pleasant evening." I hung up, put the phone on the table, and felt the last burden of the past fall from my shoulders. Lorraine walked up to me and handed me a glass of sparkling water. "April," she chuckled. "Cruel, but fair. They have time to save up," I smiled, "and to learn to cook for themselves. After all, they can find the recipes in my old cookbook. If Bryce hasn't sold it to a second-hand dealer, that is." The doorbell rang. The guests had arrived. I straightened my toque, took a deep breath, and swung open the kitchen doors. "Welcome to the Black Door," I said, walking out to the people who looked at me with admiration. "Tonight on the menu, we have freedom, with a light flavor of duck and victory." Friends, that concludes the story of Martha James. A story about how once the cup of patience overflows, a quiet, obedient woman turns into an iron lady capable of defending herself and her dignity. What do you think? Did Martha do the right thing? Was she too cruel to her own daughter? After all, Destiny, whatever she was still her flesh and blood. Or does betrayal erase family ties, and should everyone get what they deserve? Please share your opinion in the comments. I'm very interested to read your thoughts. Have you ever had similar situations in your life where you had to choose between love for family and self-respect? And perhaps you want to know what happened next? Did Destiny and Bryce manage to climb out of the debt hole? Did they come to Martha's restaurant in April, paying the full price? If you are interested in the continuation of this story, or want to hear new tales of strong people, be sure to let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply gave you some feeling, please hit the like button for this video. It is the best reward for me. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new audiobooks. We wish you all the best. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the center of the screen. Click on it to watch our other most exciting stories. Until next time, M.